Orks, 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 orks. Today I'll be mostly talking about orcs. Well, sorry about that. I don't know what happens. I put the hat on and it all goes wrong. I'm Dan. Welcome to Woven Minis. Today I'm going to talk about constructing a 40k army of orcs using the new Taktikal Brigade which they released with the Grotmas Detachments. And I took it to a local model show with our club and we played a little exhibition game of 40k. So the goal here was to have a nice looking game of 40k with all painted armies and showing people what you can do with miniatures, because this kind of model show is a little bit more geared at railway enthusiasts and people with model planes and model boats and things like that. So the wargaming aspect of things isn't massively represented there. It's only a small kind of model show, but it's a really nice one to go to. We enjoy it and it gives us a good opportunity to play a game or two and perhaps entice a few new members along to the club. So it's a win-win for everyone. So to put our best foot forwards when it comes to showing off what war games look like and what we do at the club to try and entice people in, we wanted to use nicely painted armies, and I'm particularly proud of this Morkanaut, which is a converted Ruzzbot. I'll show you later on how I converted it from a Lemon Russ, and that's really the linchpin of my Blood Axe army. So when I run orcs, I tend to run goths because they're the biggest and the hardest, even though clans don't matter anymore. From a narrative point of view, I tend to still think of things in clans, but I like blood axes as well. And this Morkanaut, even though the arm keeps falling off, and it fell off enough times, I've now used a magnet so that when it does inevitably fall off, it sticks back on again. But I like this as a sort of centerpiece because it looks very blood axey to me. So I figured using the Grotmas Detachment Taktikal Brigade would be a good place to start for making a real cool thematic sort of blood axe army. Now, I like the idea of using the tactics and the idea of how if you fail in your role you can do some damage. Kind of harks back to older editions where if you failed a leadership test then your boss would crack some heads to get the boys moving again. I think that's pretty cool. They have nerfed that since then, which is a whole nother discussion for another video about the way that things get changed and nerfed all the time. But for this one I'll just focus on this, and I misread this shooter drills tactic here. Only works on infantry and mounted models, doesn't work on vehicles. So I thought it was going to help my Morkanaut do a good job of shooting, but it didn't. I mean, it did in the first game when I misread it and accidentally used the wrong rule. But it kind of, again, another discussion for another video about the complication of 40k. There's so many rules and so many things to remember that everybody makes mistakes, I think. Well, certainly at our club. And I don't think we're idiots. I think we just struggle with the complexity of the game. Anyway, I'm putting together the army list here, just showing you it's 10 points over the 1,000 point limit that we had, which is because GW changed the points cost of the Big Mech with shock attack gun, added 10 points onto him since we played the game. It was 80 points before. Anyway, I decided that if I'm going to do a nice sneaky Taktikal Brigade, you've got to have Boss Snickrot in there, you've got to have some commandos. I wanted to have the Big Mech with shock attack gun because I could use the enhancement to make him shoot better. I was going to put him with some mech guns because I misread it and thought the mech guns could use the shooter drills as well. And also I was kind of going with what have I got painted to a good level to show things off. And I painted up a load of this stuff for an Apocalypse game that we did at a previous model show a couple of years ago. So these things are all painted up to a decent standard, as I'll show you a bit later on. And that's really how I focused on getting the army together. It was more a case of what's painted, what looks good, and what's going to be fun, as opposed to what's going to be the most competitive list. And certainly, now that I've read the rules a bit more carefully and realised that a lot of the tactics don't work for vehicles, the mech guns are not ideal, the Morkanaut is not ideal. So when it comes to being, you know, as tactical as possible, it's perhaps not the most tactical. I would have put more looters in here, I would have put some storm boys in here, but I just didn't have them painted up. So that's something that I need to do. So anyway, you'll also notice the commandos don't have all the extra weapons. Again, because I haven't got those painted, I've got some regular commandos, which I'll show you later on, which I think look great and I'm really happy with. But actually maybe the commandos work quite well, having just choppers and sluggers. They don't necessarily need all the extra gubbins, but yeah, we'll see. You'll see that we did a little practice game the day before, and then in the next video I'll show you what happened on the actual day. I've got some nice footage of the battle, and it did look really good. I'm really pleased with it, and I enjoyed how the army worked. So I was scouring eBay years ago to find a lemon rust that I could convert into a Ruzzbot, and I found this beauty which was already partially assembled. So I thought, great, it's actually cheaper than buying a lemon rust, about the same height as an Imperial Knight, more or less. And then once I finally got myself an official Gorkanaut, it's the same height as that. Because I had the Gorkanaut, I had all the spare bits and pieces for the Morkanaut from the sprue, so I kept all those and added them onto my existing Ruzzbot. So it's basically what you see is what you get. It's got the custom mega cannon, mega blasters and all that kind of stuff. I had some old school rocket launchers from the old buggies to stick on as well, which I thought looked really cool. Extra bits of gubbins and field generators and whatever on the back. So yeah, it's essentially just any old bits that I had knocking about. I had the front bit from a battle wagon. I thought that might do as a kind of looking like a hatchway. Some brass rod to make this pincher thing, because I thought, you know, if it's being used by a mech boy, the existing wrecking ball looked pretty cool, but I thought having some sort of big claw would be a nice thing to do. So it was just whatever I felt like at the time to make it kind of look like a Morkanaut more or less, and that was it. I decided to go with quite a grey colour scheme, imagining that it was originally an Imperial Guard tank that had been looted and turned into this. Lots of dry brushing. The subtle effect of dry brushing, even on a big model like this, worked really well. Picked out all the rivets and all that kind of stuff. So it was a pretty simple, pretty quick colour scheme doing that, and then just picking out bits of colour here and there. A big old wash over a lot of it, and then you end up with something that looks a bit like this. And I'm really pleased with it. I mean, it's not a walker because it's got the tracks, but if you look back in the old days, they always had Ruzzbots were a thing. You know, it's a really good conversion to do, and as you can see here with my undercoated Gorkanaut, it fits in really nicely size-wise. So once I've got that painted up, that's going to be a Goth Gorkanaut, because, you know, I need to have a big old stompy robot for the Goths and one for the Blood Axes to balance it out. You know, it looks effective, I think. It's a very easy conversion. You just get a lemon rust, turn the chassis 390 degrees and stick it between the tracks, and then start sticking stuff on it and work like a proper mech does. So anyway, yeah, happy with that, and I thought that's going to be the basis for my 1,000-point army for this game. So I'll do a little showcase of what the rest of the army looks like. So the sneaky boy himself, Snickrot. This is a fine cast one, which I bought not long before the plastic one came out, annoyingly. Although I kind of in some ways prefer this model, and the fine cast ended up being okay in this case. But a really cool model, and he leads the sneaky commandos that I converted from various sources. Bits of Blood Bowl Orks, commander from the Stomper, bits from third parties, Storm Boys, mechs, all sorts of things. I converted these from previous edition of Kill Team, and they went along with these boys I converted as well. So my thinking here, this was in the older days of Kill Team before the new Commandos came out. You could have boys, and I figured that the Blood Axe boys would look a bit more like paras. You know, they're elite, but they're not as elite as the Commandos, and they'd be a bit more regimented, so you could tell which ones were which. And they'd contrast well with the kind of more individualistic sort of SAS Commando style thing. That was my thinking anyway. So I got these heads with the berets on, which I think look really cool. And in this case, I decided to just combine the two little squads together to make one larger squad of commandos, which I think, you know, makes sense for this game. But in the future, I'm going to do a bit more, have some more different commando units. But having commandos just with sluggers and choppers actually does work quite nicely. And if you're going to be properly blood axey and tactical, I think you need some artillery in the back. One of the great things about Orks is making stuff out of junk, and that cannon there I made years ago out of random bits and pieces just to save myself some money on buying another metal cannon. And the other mech guns there, I've made those out of spare bits from the Stomper or from the Warhammer Blaster Jet. I didn't need the Smasher gun because I made a Dakar Jet. Got the tractor cannon bits from the old Meganobs kit. I mean, it's a really good way to get creative and have a bit of fun. So I think the Smasher Gun and the Tractor Cannon look pretty much like the official models, quite obvious to see what they are. And the Pulsar Rocket, I use that as a bubble chucker, because the Pulsar Rocket having a random effect seems to make sense to me. And in terms of these old big guns, they're not really in the game anymore unless you use Legends, but I think in a casual game, use them as Smasher Guns. Nobody's really going to complain. If they do you want to play that game? I mean, it seems to me that when Games Workshop takes things out of the game and then forces you to buy new models, if you've got a viable alternative and it's on the right sort of size base, which these are, seems to me like it should be alright. And I think these artillery pieces all look really cool. One day I'm sure they'll bring back big guns and they'll bring back tracks and buggies and all that, and it'll be like Gorka Morka all over again, and that will be wonderful. But until then, use what you want. And speaking of Gorka Morka, we've got a couple of old Gorka Morka boys here working as spanners, keeping the mech guns operating. So these, one of them is the old metal spanner, and the other one's actually a gunner from a buggy that I've converted into a spanner. And I just think the models look so characterful, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of having the crew. I like to put a couple of spanners in there, because in the old days you used to have a lot of mechs included in different units, but you don't anymore. But I think having some spanners in there just as the crew just looks cool. And I've got a load of old grots that I bought, got some old grots off eBay, converted up some grots to be the crew, painted them with a slightly more sickly green colour. I used just a wash over the undercoat with these ones, just to get a kind of sickly colour. They're not being looked after particularly well, because they're only grots after all. But anyway, I really like the look of these old cannons and whatever, and some of the crews being converted from fantasy goblins as well. And I think, yeah, that's one of the great things about Orks I really love, is being creative and doing things that sort of look cool. Might not be the most tactically effective, but it's all a bit of a laugh at the end of the day, and that's what it's about. And leading these artillery pieces, I've got this big mech with a shock attack gun, one of the old classic metal ones. I've got quite a few of these. I picked them up in some job lots off eBay, so I need to figure out what to do with them, because you can't include them all as big mechs. And I've got some of the newer ones as well, so maybe they could be some sort of looters or something. I was thinking about counting those mech guns, but I've got enough mech guns now as it is. Anyway, for this particular game, I've got a big mech with a shock attack gun and the artillery pieces being all tactical at the back, so that'll be alright. And leading this tactical brigade, I've got this Goth war boss, Thrug Bullneck, in his mega armour with his mega knob bodyguards. This guy I've talked about in another video when it was the 35th anniversary of 40k, and they put out this really cool scenario, Battle at the Farm. I did a video about that, I'll link it below, so go and check that out. It was really good fun, really good way to introduce people to 40k, because it was using elements of sort of rogue trader with a GM to control the action, so really good for new players. Anyway, really like the model. In my lore for this army, I've decided that Thrug is learning the ways of the Blood Axe from Snickrot, learning that maybe sometimes you don't just crump things in the head straight away, you hang it back a little bit and then crump them later, or something. Anyway, he's learning to be a bit more cunning and a bit less brutal, but still pretty brutal. The Mega Knobs are a mix of the old metal kits and the newer plastic ones, and I think they mix together really nicely. There's a slight scale creep, the plastic ones are a little bit bigger, but not enough to worry about. And I'm pretty happy with the paint jobs I did in these. Did it quite a while ago, and I think they could probably do with a little bit more of a dirty wash on them or something, but yeah, pretty good. I've got some more Mega Knobs to paint up to go along with some big mechs and stuff like that, so I really like Mega Knobs, and when they roll 6 for their advances, as they often do, they're fantastic. So I was just getting the army ready. I thought I'd just show my transport solution. I tend to use KR multi-cases for everything, and that's because you've got these nice foam slots you can fit things in, and because it's soft foam, then it's kind of a bit movable, and you can squeeze things in without them getting broken too much. And then you know exactly what you've got, because you can see when things are missing. There's been a lot of people using magnets and stuff recently, and I think magnet solutions are pretty good, but in terms of putting things on a shelf, I've got a lot of different armies, and having the KR multi-case boxes, they fit on the shelf really nicely, and then nice and easy to stack the foam up and put them in a cardboard box and carry them to the club, which is really useful. The only thing that they're not quite so good at is fitting in particularly big models. So when it comes to the Morkanaut, Gorkanaut, I've used the spare offcuts of foam from the KR multi-case boxes to put in a really useful box to make a nice little snug fitting home for these two robots to go in, which is pretty cool. So it's quite a handy sort of thing to do, because you get quite a lot of spare foam when you start picking and plucking and making space for other things to go in. I know a lot of people don't like the foam because you can sometimes have things breaking off, but I've not had that being an issue with these. I try to be quite careful packing them in, making sure that they don't get caught too much or anything like that. So yeah, everything normally survives the trip down to the club. Ready for a battle. Throg Bullneck was in charge of this warband, but he'd been told very clearly by Gazkul in no uncertain terms he was to leave all the thinking to Snickrot, the commando boss. As a proud Goth war boss, this really ground Thrug's gears, but he wasn't about to go against the wishes of the great prophet of Dawar. All Thrug wanted to do was charge forward, bellowing war at the top of his lungs, and give those Death Skull beast staggers a good crumping. But Snickrot had other plans. He held his Meganobs back, positioning to receive the charge of the Squiggle boys. Those cowardly Death Skulls had retreated further back anyway. He supposed it was okay to let their squigs do all the walking. He could save his energy for swinging his huge chopper later on. Snickrot skulked around somewhere. Thrug thought he'd seen the blood axe somewhere behind the Met guns, but who knew with that slippery commando? Talking of Met guns, the hodgepodge of artillery pieces opened up on the kill rig and the Squiggle boys, peppering them with fire. The artillery pieces didn't do much, but then the mech shock attack guns started to whir into life. Masses of green energy slammed towards the Squiggogs, and the following screams of materialising snotlings was accompanied by orcish grunts of pain and the wet slap of parted meat falling to the ground. It was no substitute for hefting a chopper through an enemy's skull, but Thrug appreciated the sheer brutality of the weapon. Finally, the Ruzzbot Morkanaut trundled forward, blazing fire from all its guns into the kill rig. Bits of the rig were flying off here and there, but it was still moving forwards. The glowing Mega Zapper did almost as much damage to the Ruzzbot as it did to the kill rig. Thrug was waiting for the charge, but he didn't have to wait long. The warbikers roared out onto the central objective, blazing away at the Met guns, while the Squiggle boys in Kilrig charged the warboss and his bodyguard, screaming, "Wah!" The Werboy tried to enhance the Squiggogs, but the psychic energy fried one of their brains instead. The warboss and his bodyguard weathered the storm and hit back, killing more riders and ripping chunks from the kill rig. The Meganobs were severely mauled, but they were still in the fight. So this was just a practice game the day before going to the model show against one of the other players, but he was using his orcs instead of the towel that he would use on the day. It was good fun. There were some highlights. The Werboy frying a Squiggle rider, that was a lot of fun. But I think we did the rule wrong. I think it should have fried himself rather than frying the Squiggle rider, which just again highlights the difficulty of 40k at the moment. It's so complicated. Even the guy I was playing, who's a fantastically good player and has played for a long time, he can get rules wrong as well because it's so wide-ranging and complicated. The shock attack gun was absolutely devastating, especially using the tactics to give it the extra Dakka. I was giving the extra Dakka to the Met guns as well because I didn't realise, so I made a mistake. But certainly the Met guns didn't do nearly as much as the shock attack gun did. And the shock attack gun for me is peak orc. You roll the dice and it might be devastating or it might be terrible. It's just a bit of a shame it doesn't blow up anything anymore, you know. That would be quite entertaining. But that's what I like about orcs, is the randomness. And the Morkanaut and the Beast Boss, they fought each other at the end and they both completely failed to kill each other, which was pathetic, but quite funny. We used tactical objectives in this game, which I think is good. It's annoying when you get ones that are impossible to do, but the strategy of tactical objectives I think is pretty good. But it does add complexity to an already complex game, so, you know, I'm not sure. Basically, I think the Tactical Brigade was a lot of fun, and it was pretty well balanced. I'm not sure they needed to nerf it, as they have done now, but maybe if you've got a completely optimized list, maybe it was needing a nerf. I wasn't using a completely optimized list and wasn't quite using it correctly. And that's the thing, 40k is so complicated. We both made mistakes and we're not idiots. We're both busy, but we're not incompetent players, but we both made mistakes in this game, and that was a theme that carried on over into the model show as well. Anyway, I had a lot of hazardous tests on the Morkanaut that I failed, nearly killed itself rather than getting killed by the enemy, which is kind of funny and also kind of annoying. But yeah, overall, it was a good fun game, and I think it was a very narrow win to the Death Skulls in the end, which was a bit of a shame, but it was very close to being a draw, which is quite good because he's a good player. Anyway, I'll be back with the next video talking about the actual model show itself and how that game went, and hopefully you enjoyed this one. Come back for the next and subscribe to the channel. Cheers.